This is the story of my mother, Hannah Sarah Perl, known as Herta. In April 2007, my son Ari Moshe and I conducted this video interview. In 1940, Herta and her parents, Baruch Wolstein and Rosa Lewinsky Wolstein, were forced into slave labor in Germany. In February 1943, the family removed their Stars of David from their coats and went underground. The family hid in the capital of the Third Reich, Berlin. On April 25, 1945, they came out of hiding. What you're about to view was never seen or heard before. It is a unique recording of perseverance, guts, and the will to live. To my knowledge, no other Jewish family lived illegal, underground, in Berlin, surviving as a family unit, and lived to tell about it. Here is her story.
I'm Herta Perl. My maiden name is Wolstein, and I live at 1195 Neal Avenue, Bronx, New York. And I was born in Calder near Kreis Schlochau, and in April 24, 1923.
Okay, that's very good. Now, Kaldestreich Schlachau is Schlachau, which is, you were born in Germany.
It's a Schlachau, Germany.
Which is really
yes.
Ostpreußen?
Westpreußen.
Oh, Westpreußen. That's West Prussia.
Westpreußen. Which
today, you can look at me too, which is today, it's today Poland.
Polish, yes.
But when you were born, that was Germany.
Germany, right.
Was it a long walk from where you lived in your house to the Grenitz, the border in Poland?
No, it was. We used to take sometimes a bicycle even, or the horse and carriage.
Mm-hmm.
My parents had one horse and carriage, and they had their own house, and in the front was the business. They had worked hard in order to put this together, because they worked. My father worked very hard on this. He worked with. He took sometimes the horse and the carriage in the country to visit the farmers when they were busy.
You sold merchandise to farmers.
Right.
What did you sell?
Arbeiterbekleidung.
Workers' clothes.
Worker,
yeah, you can say it in German. I can help translate if you'd like.
Yes, right.
No, workers' clothes.
Yes.
Like an Army-Navy store.
Well, yes, but that was, of course, not like this. And for the woman, material, while in the winter they were sewing and knitting and
so they can make their own clothes.
Right, and it was, and they were not able to go to the store because it was cold, and so some people was easier. So my father went
out on the road
every day to another small place to give to bring was the people
the merchandise
to
deliver.
So that was hard work. In the winter it was very cold, and in the summer, in the heat, when the farmers were on the fields, and but on market days they came to the city, and
Which day was market day? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was usually, I think, Tuesdays and Fridays.
Tuesdays and Fridays.
Something like that.
And on market day, what would happen?
On market day, sometimes more people came to the store, Then my father stayed home.
You mean stayed home to work in the store?
To work in the store, yes. Because my mother wasn't alone.
You seem to know a lot about this, too. Did you work in the store, too?
I was a little kid then.
Uh-huh.
But I liked when I came out from school in the afternoon, I liked to sit in the store where, even before I went to school, I had my dolls in the corner, and being I was an only child, I didn't like to stay
Home alone.
alone. Where we were home, the store was in the front,
And the house was in the back?
the house, nicht the house, the rooms.
The rooms.
This was one house.
The whole store was one house.
Store, and then came, living room and another room and my room and the parents' room. And it was a small house.
Did you know any of the customers?
The customers came, I know, it was different than now in the store. When they came, they used to talk,
Mm-hmm.
The woman used to tell my mother all kinds of stories. And they all liked my parents, my father a lot. And then, until it came, later when the Nazis came, and when they used to bring, they used to stay, the SR used to go and stay.
The SA, which was the Nazi army.
Nazis, yes,
Right.
the Nazis, they were not
The stormtroopers.
armies, they were,
The stormtroopers.
yeah, no, they made them go in front of the store.
Right.
And of course the customers after 1933 were afraid then to come in. So little by little this started like this. In the beginning, sometimes the Nazi uniform was standing in front of the store, came in the evening in the back and wanted to buy.
Yeah.
Sometimes they were, but little by little it always changed. And even for me, I was a child, I went to school. It was a public school, right? Because by us were only a few Jewish children.
How many Jewish families were in your town of Schlachau?
I don't know exactly, but there were only a few. And,
Did they have a Friday night shul and Shabbos
yes,
shul?
oh yes, we didn't live far, we lived close to the shul. Only a few houses away was the shul, and my father went to shul there, and he liked to take me because I was, his daughter, and and I went during the week in the afternoon to Hebrew.
The Hebrew school?
Yes, that was, the Chazan was also the teacher. And that is where I learned,
Do you remember the Chazan and the teacher's name?
Yes, Daniel were his last name. That was
Daniel?
The Chazan was also the teacher.
Daniel?
Daniel was the last name.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember before.
Did you have a rabbi?
He had a wife and he had two daughters. But the daughters were older, much older than me. And
you have any
and
relatives?
on Shabbos, they took us children together for an Onik Shabbat. We used to bring from at home like an apple or something, everybody, and we put this together. And, we learned some songs. And we were not many. We were maybe 10 children or so. A few boys. And my age were two boys. And girl, and then 1 year older, 2 girls, but a few more. So, and then...
What was school like when you went to school?
School was so, in the beginning was not bad, but then later, especially when the Hitlerjugend came up, and everybody had to belong to the Hitlerjugend, of course not me, not you. Then I was the Juche,
That was 1930.
Nobody even wanted to sit with me.
That was 1933?
Yeah, this was so after 1934.
1934.
34.
Uh-huh.
So
you were about 10, 11 years old at the time?
Maybe 10 years for sure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, how long did you have any mishpucha living in Schlachau with you?
Yes, my mother's youngest brother, Uncle Philip, he had, with his wife, and they had one son, Günther, which was about 2 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And he had also a lot of trouble from the boys in his class.
Mm-hmm.
And
So at that time, did your parents think about leaving Schlachau?
yes, of course. My mother didn't really wanted to go because the grandmother lived in Poland.
What was the grandmother's name?
Sempulno.
Sempulno.
Sempulno. In German was it Sempelburg. But under the Polish Sempulno.
Sempulno.
And in the beginning we went even with a bicycle or with a horse and carriage.
To Poland.
Yes, it was not far. It was in the beginning we had papers that we could go anytime we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then came this, they couldn't, the Scheuchert couldn't Schecht anymore. And
You mean in
it
Sempelburg?
was not, in Sempelburg, nicht in Schlachau. And this was not kosher anymore,
This was 1933?
That was right after, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we went, the times, I remember this. So we went to Konitz, that was the next close, in Poland, and we always bought chickens there. And the chickens we could, shecht there by a Scheuchert, and then we brought it over. So this way we had chicken.
So from your house in Germany to Poland was maybe an hour by bicycle?
I think even less.
Less than an hour by bicycle.
Yes. And we bought, and we could bring kosher chicken over.
Right.
Yes. But if it would have been up to my father, he would even then already
Have left Schlachau.
But my mother didn't want to leave her mother,
Her
my
mother
grandmother.
lived in Sempelburg.
On this.
What was your grandmother's name?
Adelina Lewinsky.
Adelina Lewinsky.
And my aunt was living with her. She
Your aunt's
was not
name?
married.
What was her name?
Sally Lewinsky.
Silly.
Yeah.
Silly Lewinsky.
And she was much younger than my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And
Now your
they
mother
lived in their own house in Sempelburg. And a few times I went in the vacation there to
So you had
summer vacation.
You had a brother. You had an uncle Philip who lived with you in
the
Schlachau.
same city, yes.
And you had an aunt Silly who lived in Sempelburg.
Yeah.
You had any other uncles or aunts?
Yes, I had in Hamburg, Uncle Alfred, my mother's brother, which came nach America. Yeah, he could not go. And we had Uncle Arthur, which they took out of he was a jeweler, and he repaired. I was once as a child a vacation there by them.
Which town?
Naugat in Pommern.
In Pommern, that's Germany.
Yeah, Germany, yes.
Right.
And they took him out of the house with his wife.
On Kristallnacht?
He never came back.
In Kristallnacht?
Yeah.
His wife too?
His wife, him and his wife. Mm-hmm. And I had no Uncle Alfred, Uncle Arthur, Uncle Philip.
There's one more.
Oh, and then was in America, der brother, Uncle Julius.
Julius.
Yes. And there was another uncle he lived in Berlin. He was married, and he was the only one. He had children, 3 children, but they went at the right time at that time it was Palestine. Yeah.
Now, which one went to Palestine? Which uncle?
Uncle Adolf.
Uncle Adolf went to Palestine.
Yes, but Uncle Adolf, he passed away because he was in the German army before, in the Yaza army.
In World War I.
In the Yaza army.
Adolf Lewinsky was in the German army, and he got gassed.
Was? And he got
gassed.
Yeah, he had something from the army,
an injury.
Yeah, an injury.
And did he make it to Palestine, or did he stay in Berlin?
He passed, I think, I'm not sure, I think he passed away before, in the last minute, and his wife went with the 3 children.
And who were the 3 children who went to Palestine?
That was, one was Julius, his name was also Julius.
Julius Lewinsky was your cousin?
Yeah, my first cousin.
Okay.
And, what was the name? I forgot.
Was it a Sperber?
Sperber, yes.
She married
Rosa
Sperber was your other cousin from
the
Adolf.
The other one, the youngest, she married somebody
from Canada. She married by the name of Stern?
I forgot the name.
Okay.
I really forgot the name.
Okay, now...
Yes, those were my only 3 cousins.
So they made it to Palestine.
Yes.
And
so anyway, coming back of Schlochau, it got really so bad that one day my father said, we can't do this anymore, to my mother. He said, we aren't even... By that time, we aren't even allowed anymore to go over the border to Poland. So we can't do this anymore. We have to go out, to auszuwandern.
Yeah.
To go out. So
auszuwandern means to leave the country.
Yes.
Yeah.
But from Schlochau, it was
impossible.
It was a small town. So he said we will go first to Berlin. From Berlin, there's all kind of organization. It will be maybe easier. In order to go Berlin, you couldn't just go like this. You needed from the police permission. So, and I remember very well the day when he was by the police. My mother was very nervous. It took a very long time. And my father finally, when he came back, he realized he was very nervous. He said over there was different police already, not the old policemen which
everybody
they knew,
yeah.
Which were nice, sondern es war von Vienna, they said, von Austria, they were different. And they made them stand with the face to the wall, and they didn't give them right away. Finally came this old policeman and which was before there, and he gave him the permission to move. Our house we had sold. He had a customer, German people, which wanted to take it over, and the money came on a Sperrkonto, they called it, a special account. And they said we would get every month an amount, but I don't know, I think my parents didn't get the amount even then.
How did you get to Berlin?
Well, first of all, we hired a furniture truck für die Furniture und alles, and then my mother and me, we went with the train, and my father, I don't know, did he go with the furniture truck or not?
And you
Yeah,
got
in Berlin, my father had people which he knew before when we had the store where he bought merchandise, and their name was Fingerhut, and they had they had this house, and they owned this house in Kastanienallee 1920.
So you own an apartment house?
Was?
An apartment house?
Das ist where the people had, and they gave us there an apartment. We rented, my father was able to rent there by them an apartment.
Do you remember the address?
Yes, I see. Kastanienallee number 1920 was the address.
19-20?
Yes.
19-20. Well,
Right.
it was
In northern Berlin.
North Berlin.
Yes. It was near der Danziger Straße, there was the subway, Schönhauser Allee. It was a huge section all over. A lot of Jewish people lived there. And the synagogue was the Temple Rikestraße. Rikestraße was the name.
The Rikestraße Synagogue.
Yeah. Das was an Orthodox, temple, where my father used to go. And
So now you settled in Berlin. It was, about 1936?
36 or 37.
So let me ask you something. Were you citizens of Germany?
No, we were not, because in Germany it was like this. My father came from Poland, so my mother and me, even though I was born in Germany, we were stateless.
So you were born stateless?
Stateless, and we could not get the German passport or any other.
So
I think the Polish passport somehow, because my father came, left there without going there.
But your father was, Upi was born in
Włocławek,
and when he was born that was Russia.
I guess so, yes, because when we were in Berlin, that was short before the night,
Crystal night.
Crystal night, yeah.
Crystal night.
Yes, and in Berlin I started working by a tailor.
You were a tailor.
Yeah, but I kind of learned there, and the first time I became members from Zionist party, because
The Zionist Party was in Germany, in Berlin. In Berlin?
In Berlin, yeah. Because it was like this when we moved, I was looking for girls, and I was talking to girls which were standing there, and when my mother saw this, she said to me, this is not for you to become a friend. I will go with you where you can make friends. And she went with me to the synagogue there, und der war Jewish Zionistisches organization.
In der Rikishasha synagogue.
Yeah, right. And there I became the first time member, really.
Mm-hmm. How did your father make a living?
Well, he tried, it was very hard, he tried to buy and invest merchandise, Balm with material where you make suits or clothes.
Textiles.
Yes, and he bought this, and he knew a few people, which were, they called it hausiras, which they came on Monday, and they took over their shoulders a couple of this, and they went, and when they came back, they paid for this what they sold.
Uh-huh.
It was very hard, not so.
Now you talked about your mother.
Yeah.
Your mother had 4 brothers and 1 sister, so you had 4 uncles and an aunt from your mother.
Yeah.
What about from your father?
My father had 1 brother which passed away in Schlochau.
His brother passed away in Schlochau?
In Schlochau.
How old was he? How old was he when he died?
Well, I don't know. That was
before you.
When I was very small.
Uh-huh.
He stayed in Schlochau with my parents together, in the same house.
What was his name?
But I was a baby or so.
What was his name? Moshe Hirsch?
Yeah, Moshe Hirsch.
His name was Moshe Hirsch?
Michael, right.
Yeah, Moshe Hirsch. So that's your father's brother.
Yes.
And what happened to your father's parents?
No, they passed away when my father was young.
When he was a young man?
He was not a young man. He was really a boy.
A boy.
And he was raised by his uncle. The uncle name was Moritz Wolstein.
Moritz Wolstein.
In Wrocławek.
Moritz Wolstein lived in Wrocławek.
Yes, and they had Tante Ruschka and the other one was also Sylvia, and then they had 3. There were 3. A few times I was there with my father.
Went to Wrocławek?
He called it, he goes and Kaiwe Overs, he used to say. Visit the grave from his parents.
His parents were buried there.
Yeah, and he took me with him there, yes. And they had a house, and in the walk-in was a shul, and I was with my father a few times. We went there. No, before we moved to Berlin.
So you had cousins?
They never came back.
They never came back from the war?
No, they were later we heard they were in
Auschwitz?
Nicht in Auschwitz. He was in Warsaw, I think.
Warsaw Ghetto?
Warsaw in Ghetto, yeah.
They died in the Warsaw Ghetto?
Yeah. I don't know. We heard from them when they were in Warsaw.
You heard how your grandmother died.
What?
I think you once told me how your grandmother died. You remember?
My what?
Your grandmother.
Oh, my grandmother, when we were in Berlin one day, my parents got a letter from Tempelburg, and the letter was written, the address, everything from the grandmother. And when they opened it, a neighbor, which they were good with, wrote inside the letter, when the German troops came into Tempelburg, they came in, they took all Jewish people out of the houses. My grandmother was hardly walking and so, and my aunt. First she made the march to the city, we go to Palestine oder was. Und dann sie took them away, there was ein Wald und ein lake. And they heard shooting, they killed them all. And in this house, they put German people, they called it Volksdeutsche, from Poland oder so.
Who were ethnic Germans.
They were German.
Who were ethnic Germans.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that my parents didn't start telling me about it, but then the mother always, my mother, but can imagine how, crying and this and this. Yeah.
So you found out.
Yeah, yeah.
Did your parents ever try to get out of Berlin, to try to get somewhere else, once your mother knew that her mother was killed by the Nazis?
My parents tried very hard. My father, even before this, as soon as we came to Berlin, he used to go there where the so-called Hilfsverein der Juden in Deutschland. There were other organizations I always had, and he went here and there, and this was impossible.
Why? Because he was stateless?
Because this was always the yes.
If you
maybe they didn't even. Maybe if people had a lot of money, maybe that would be easier for them. I don't know. I only know that my father really tried very hard, and in the meantime, we heard that when the Kristallnacht was in Schlochau, they burned down the shul, and the Jewish people they took out, and they were standing, and the Goyim were singing mit Heil Hitler und alles. And
what year was this?
Das was
1938.
Kristallnacht was.
November
were in Berlin already.
November 1938, when Kristallnacht
we
was.
were in Berlin already. And then was happened, my uncle and my aunt and Büterchen, they came to Berlin, and he was lucky, they said they were lucky, they got the papers to get to Shanghai, China, with a train. I remember when we brought them to the train. And at that time my father said, we hope we will come with the next transport. They took us together, but they didn't let us go. So anyway,
So your uncle Philip and aunt
they came to Shanghai.
Was it Uncle Philip and aunt, what's her name? Lena and their cousin Günther were able to get to Shanghai for the war, before the war started.
Yeah.
And
Nicht before the war. Was it before the war?
Did the war start?
I'm not sure if it was before the war or after the war.
No, it had to be before the war.
Yeah.
They got to Shanghai before the war.
Yeah. So I don't remember this anymore.
Uh-huh.
So I only remember when I was a child, when we were standing by the train, and so, and they were the lucky one,
Right.
That is what that they could get out of Germany.
So what happened on Kristallnacht when with your father?
On Kristallnacht really nicht. Das was when the war with Poland started.
Uh-huh.
I don't know the day.
September 1st.
Yeah.
1939.
The war with Poland started. All of a sudden in the morning at 6 o'clock, a policeman came and took my father out. And the same thing happened all in the neighborhood. They took the men out. and they brought him to they called it the Funkturm am Kaiserdamm in Berlin, and they we of course first didn't know and alles. And where we went to the neighbors, same thing, the woman, were alone. But then we found out there, and they said that they bring all the men to Poland, but that was not true. Those were mostly people which were like my father from Poland, but some other also they took together. And my father, they saw what was going on. They were outside laying, not in outside in a place, not in a room or whatever, and how it was. And then one day they sat down and they registered the names from the men. That is what my father said. He registered all the names, and then they said after they registered the names, they said you go right, and you go to the right side, and you go to the right side. And they said to them, the people said, oh, they will send all the men to Poland, back to Poland. So my father thought by myself, it is a war with Poland, and he doesn't think so. Anyway, when his turn came, and he said his name, Bernhard Wolstein, you were born in Poland, yeah? He said, no, I wasn't. When I was born, this was Russia. I never was in Poland. This was Russia. This was the truth of. He said what was the truth. So he was actually he said that he was the first one who said this. So he looked at him and then he said, left side. So a few after him said also similar things, they were probably were similar born.
Right.
So they were only a few men which stand left. So my father then thought by himself, maybe he made a mistake. He should say, yes, this is Poland, and go where everybody was. But it was not a mistake. To them, all of a sudden they said, you could take your money there, and you could go back to your apartment or the home. So what happened, all these other men, they sent to Buchenwald, to the concentration camps.
Wow.
Yes, they didn't come back. And there were only very few which came back.
And this was 1939.
This was, when the war started.
So how many days was your father away from the home when this happened? So now I don't exactly, I think it was more than 1 week, maybe 2 weeks. I don't know. 2 weeks?
Yeah. Maybe 10 days or something. I think so. But, and the woman came crying to us, The woman came crying to us, so my father said, this is what happened. So afterwards then, they sent my father a letter and he had to go and work. A few times work in the country, but then in the Eisenbahn and on the Schienen.
The Eisenbahn, the train.
Schienengleise.
The state Bahn.
Yes, the state Bahn.
The Eisenbahn.
Not the Bahn.
Not the U-Bahn.
Not the U-Bahn.
Not the
das
U-Bahn.
war regular
The
trains,
regular
the trains.
The regular trains that went between the countries,
Yes.
which was
And,
called the Stadtbahn, the Stadtbahn.
Yes. What he had to do there, first of all, es war eine so-called Judenschicht. Only Jewish men. There were Jewish men doctors even, which never knew how to do a schaufel or whatever.
This was like slave labor.
Was?
This was slave labor.
Yes. And he, like in the winter it was icy, they had to entice die Schienen, das ist what my father said, how hard this was. And at night sometimes, even at night. And I had, and I got one day, when I was 17 years old, then my father got the idea. He got very friendly with this man. I have forgot his, I forgot his name in the moment. Maybe later.
Maybe you remember later.
Yeah, that was a young man, a Jewish man also. He just got married. And they both were talking between them. It is, man darf sehen, ein place, wo man kann sich verstecken, where you can hide. And with him together, he found this place in this was Neukölln, by Frau Ahles. And my father started already to bring little by little things there, what we thought we could need or so. It was a risiko, because the Frau could say later.
It was a big risk.
Yes.
It was a big risk, sure.
A big risk.
How did you know you can trust her?
We didn't know. Actually, they were a little bit like communists, So, but the woman could say, I do for nothing, and das is my clothes and my bedding and mine.
But your father.
She could have said it, but she did not.
Did your father know her for some business connection?
Was?
Did your father know her from some business connection? Did he know the names when he was doing his work, his business with the textiles?
With the textile, when he stopped already, and he lost money also.
Okay, so they found this Frau Ahles, and they started putting some food and
things. Food got spoiled.
Right.
But like Bettwäsche, weiß ich, gute things what you can.
Right.
So anyway, then when I was 17 years old, exactly on my birthday,
which is April 24th.
I got a letter from the Arbeitsamt für Juden in Fontana Promenade. I have to come there. So when I went there, they said, they gave me the address from this factory, munition factory. Schubert was the name, W. Schubert.
W. Schubert Munitions Factory?
Yeah, a factory, I weiß. Yeah, they made parts for aeroplanes also. And in the meantime, we were not allowed to use trains or subways, right? So, and we had already to wear the yellow star mit Jude. And but I got from the factory a
permit,
a letter, said paper, said I should bring it to the police. Die Jüdin Herta Wolstein is allowed to use the subway, the
U-Bahn.
First a train, first a
bus.
Nicht a bus.
A trolley.
Wagon.
A trolley.
Yeah. Die Straßen.
A street bus.
To the train, to the subway, nach Schönhauser Allee bis bis there where the factory was. So I went there, and also in a Judenschicht. I had to start working there on a machine. They showed me how, and we were a few, girls and men, young men, and so, which always worked the night.
Which neighborhood was this munitions factory in?
That was outside von Berlin in a Vorort.
What happened with your mother?
It was all.
Well, my mother was in the meantime at home. She was not so well really, and she was at home. And my father had still to work, in the Gleisbau there. And one day she gets a letter that she have to come to this place. I think it was in the Oranienburger Straße was written on it, wo die Synagogue dort is. They made that place. And she could bring, I don't know, 50 pounds or 100 pounds
of clothes.
Food, oder was? No, nicht food, clothes, yeah. And then on the day when she was supposed to come. And in the neighborhood, a lot of neighbors got the same kind of letter where people were working and the mother was at home. It was, at that time, it was like this, that the mother was home. And what usually happened, the family went with them, because they didn't want to let the mother go and stay there. But my father said, what, Herta, take the mother to the factory and ask the Meister, tell him this, if your mother could work there and get these also.
Permits to work.
Yes.
What's a Meister?
The foreman.
Yeah,
the foreman in charge of that area of work.
Correct. So that's what I did. Well, first of all, when we came in the things, they said in the Straßenbahn, they said, you can stay of me, because I had then said of my mother, said, you have to get out, you are not allowed. So, of course, I went out with my mother and we started walking. We walked there. It was very hard. And then the Meister gave us, and my mother started working there also with me. So altogether, I think 2.5 years I worked.
You worked there between 1939, 1940, 1941?
Yeah, 42.
Up until 1942.
1942.
Do you remember the type? Ma, do you remember the type of work you did?
Yes, I was standing on a machine, and the machine, das war on the laufenden Band oder so.
Right.
And I had to take this part and put it in the machine, and I had the machine was around here. I had to, to back and forth, and then I put it there on the this like a bank, but it went to the next to the next one. And my mother was noch lucky, the Meister put her to sit down, and all she had to do was, put the parts in the machine, and then put it down, the machine.
And you stood the whole time?
I stood the whole time.
You stood how many hours a day?
8 hours, from 12 till 3 o'clock, I think.
Did you have a break?
No, nicht von 12. From 3 o'clock in the afternoon till 12 o'clock at night.
Did you have a break ever?
Did you have a lunch?
Yes, we had a lunch break. We brought a sandwich from at home. We had a lunch break, yes.
How long did it take you to get to the munitions factory?
Well, I think it was at least an hour. Yeah.
Back and forth, each way an hour.
I think an hour.
Did anybody in the streets of Berlin beat you up because you were wearing a Yiddish star?
Well, nobody beat me up, but they there was some wise guy that liked to do, spit so or so, as if, yeah.
How did they treat you in the ammunitions factory?
Oh, those all Jews.
Well, we were working and,
It was all Jews?
was?
It was all Jews in the factory?
All Jews,
It was
nur die
slave labor.
Meisters und die Vorarbeiter waren, they needed to show us and watched us.
Now this was slave labor,
Yeah.
so you didn't get paid for that.
Yeah.
You didn't get
Well,
paid?
no, they gave us 18 mark a week, which was not much for the work.
18. How did you buy food to live?
Oh, we bought in the stores, but we were not allowed to go, only on a certain time, like in the afternoon from 3 till 4. Now, being this, I worked there, I could go from 10 till 11, And when Goyim came and, other people came and the store was full and so, and there we were. And very often I remember a woman which said, "You are not allowed to come now in here." And the foodman said, "She is allowed, she has a schreiben." They were afraid also. In every street, there were so
Spies.
Nazis with
Who would tell, watch
a woman, this was sogar a woman, which watched and every little bit and so.
That's very interesting.
And sometimes, we got, at that time, we couldn't buy as much as we wanted. We got the special thing we could only buy, potatoes and so. Potatoes and so, but special vegetable or special fruits or so, we couldn't buy they were not allowed to give us. And sometimes my mother was, from years ago, always good with the meat. Sometimes when the fruitman or the grocery man, his name was Sachs, and he was a very nice man. He always asked my father questions about how to, from the store and so. And later, this comes not later, later when we went in illegal, he helped us with packages sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So now you're working, and you ever see your father when you were working? Were you working the same hours?
No, sometimes we came and my father worked very hard there. I don't know.
Did you work 7 days a week, or did you have a day off?
No, we had Sundays was closed there.
Sundays was closed,
yeah.
so you're able to rest on
Sundays
Sunday.
we were off, yeah. And then...
you couldn't do much
and then one day, when we came to the factory, they said, they started to munkel, said, no, I don't want.
You don't want some water?
They said
I'll put it down there.
that they will take away, that they will take us away, and there will come other people now. People mit East are going to come. Das ist what they say. Mit East was blue, and there was written down East was mit Osten, right? someone will come and we have to show them how the machine arbeiten. So when we came home at night, my mother and me, to the apartment, my father was there, completely dressed, and said by him happened the same thing. That they said that the next day the people said it. If it's true or not, he doesn't know. But he thinks now is time that we go. So it was not easy for my parents to go out, you know. We took each gave me a little bag, my father, me and my mother and himself. And then we started, we closed the door, locked the door, and took off our star and started walking at night to where Mrs. Alice lived. And and this is when we went in this, she gave us this one small room, and there came also my father's friend with his wife, and we were together in a room. And later a cousin from my mother came also there. But before we went there was for my mother a cousin, Hedwig Gumpert. She lived there in Kastanienallee, around the corner. I think it was Oderberger Straße. So when she heard from my mother that we have a place where we try to hide, she says, give me, maybe you can get for me. So my parents got her this place by a friend from Frau Arlich. This lived like a block away in a basement. And she, the Hedwig, with her husband and two little boys, they went there also.
How do you spell their last names?
Gumpert.
G-U... M-P-E-R-T?
I guess so. I'm not sure. I know. His name was Willy Gumpert, her Hedwig Gumpert, and the Kinder. One hieß Kurtchen.
Kurt.
And the other one, Alfred maybe. One was maybe 7 or 8 years and the other 4 years. So anyway, we came to Frau Arlich and we were now sitting in the room.
You're illegal.
What?
Now you're going underground.
Yes. No.
You took the star off, the yellow star off.
Which was very dangerous. Because every policeman, every SR man, when he felt so, could say, show me your identification.
Yeah.
And what did we have to show? Mit Jurstehen and identification. So this was already very dangerous. And
so you're in the room, and other people join you in the where was your hideout located? Which neighborhood?
Yeah, that was also not. That was. I think it was Neukölln.
Neukölln.
Yeah, I think Neukölln.
And this was Alice's apartment.
Alice, he's the
Alice.
Frau.
Do you remember her last name?
Das ist her last name.
How do you spell it?
Alice.
How do you spell it?
Alisch, I would say.
Uh-huh. And where was the apartment? Where was the room that you hid out?
It was to the backyard, one window, a small room, and it was very, very hard. We couldn't go around so much, and the bathroom was outside in the hall for everybody.
In the hall?
in a hall, and the neighbors, they were afraid of neighbors.
In the hall or in the backyard?
And not in the backyard, in a hall, but not outside, but in a hall. And but I could. She for others said I could go there, but the others couldn't go there.
In the bathroom?
Yeah.
The bathroom had a toilet and everything?
The bathroom had it, but nobody, they couldn't go.
So what?
That I carried the pail all this.
How did the people go to the bathroom in the room?
Between the Schrank and the wall and a curtain davor.
Was the room about as big as this living room?
I don't think so.
Uh-huh.
Well,
and who lived?
There were 2 beds. I think 2 beds were there.
And who lived in this room?
My mother, my father, Mr. Oh God, what was his name? Him and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
For a little while, even noch somebody.
So you had
a cousin for my mother. What was his name? I think Arthur was his name.
your mother's cousin, another couple,
Yeah.
and your parents and you.
Yeah.
So there were 7 people living in the room, smaller than the size of this living room.
Yeah,
And when they went to the bathroom, they could only go behind the curtains in the room.
Yeah.
And you cleaned out the pail more than once a day.
Yeah.
And how long did you live in a situation like that?
We lived, I think it was about 3 months, 2-3 months, I don't know, this was, 2-3 months.
2-3 months?
Yeah, I think so. Because what happened then, one day, or was 2 months, one day, Frau Alice used to go in the morning, so 10 o'clock, and tried to buy, some bread or so. She comes out and sees in front of the house where her friend with the Kumpats lived, with Dora was her first name, so many people standing. So she went and looked and said, what's the matter? Why is everybody so... Don't you know? The people going and said, the people said, don't you know, die Dora hat Juden behalten. And now they take them out. So I think was it SA, or was it police even? Police, I think, they took out.
Your cousins with the 2 boys, 8 and 4, 7 and 4.
And the German woman which
Dora.
Them. Yeah.
She also went to the camps?
Yes, they went. The Dora then came back like 3 months. The woman came back like 3 months, the German woman. And she said, of course, that she didn't know that they were Jews. But it was not true, she knew. But she was in a working camp. She really looked bad, from
right.
working for 3 months.
Right.
And always there's a question, but the Gumpats never came back.
They died in the camps.
Yeah.
The little boys died in the camps.
Yeah. All
so now Mrs. Alish came back to your apartment very scared.
Yes, und wenn my father said, Frau Alish, was ist passiert? Was happened? Was happened then? And she told us what happened. Then my father alone said, we have to leave. We wouldn't stay there no more because we were afraid. Even the children could say, because
the people living in the apartment, the other apartments could say something.
Yeah, because sometimes the Hedwig used to take the 2 little boys and come with them there where we were for a little while, and then she went out because they had it very hard, with 2 children, the small children, you can. So anyway, we had to go out. So again, my father gave me a bag with change and some bread, and my mother, and we had 3 of us. We walked out, but we didn't know where.
Do you remember which day this was, which year?
I don't remember this anymore. I know 2.5 years we were behalten, all together,
All together?
All together. But there, that
How
was
long
a
did this,
few months,
You stayed a few months in Mrs. Alish's apartment.
Yes.
And then you left in the middle of the night.
No, not in the middle of the night. We went then, little by little, out and walked away, There was a park. We went first in the park and we sat down and thought, what are we going to do now? To sit in the park was even dangerous also for anybody, because people had to work. It was the war. For men it was not even more dangerous, because it very often they went and said, show your identification, because at that time they were also looking for
deserters,
which
left the army.
From the army, which wie sagt man? Deserters from the army. So, my father was noch a young man and good looking, So, not like an old man, He didn't look. So we were going here and going there a few days. We even went to the subway and stayed at night in the subways. They had when people missed the trains,
You mean they had like a room where you missed the trains?
Yes.
Where you could stay a few hours?
Yes, but that was so dangerous.
Because
nobody can imagine.
Because any Nazi can come for your identification papers and say, how come you don't have it?
That's right, and so somebody could say, we look like you, and I don't know. We tried not to, And my father always said to me, Herterchen, if something happens to me, als wenn jemand will mich wegnehmen, if
somebody wants to take Grandpa away, right?
So that you pretend that you don't know me. I should make that I don't know. I should not start crying, Daddy oder so, sondern I should pretend that I didn't know him,
Right.
And I should then try to live. So, he always said it to me when we went someplace, because he always was afraid that they could take him. My mother, the woman sitting, was also dangerous, but not so. And then, after a few days, my mother said, she cannot take it anymore. If she only could go someplace, at least to wash herself, and so. So anyway, so then my father remembered a place, he had a friend which had married a girl which wasn't Jewish, but they went to Gilkovich, but they went to South America. They had a little boy also. And when we came, so he went to the mother from in an apartment building. I remember, not far from Alexanderplatz, I think was it. When we rang the bell and she opens the door, the first thing we saw, a big picture from Hitler, and she started screaming. My daughter did not need it to marry Tim Gilkovich, and she didn't let us in even.
Wow.
And my daughter didn't need all this and shown. But my father went right away, we turned with them, but she started talking, I remember.
Wow. All right, let's take a little break here a minute.
Yes.
Ma, relax. Just take a little help you.
No.
Okay.
And not only this, my father said
I need it.
he thinks that she is for herself also afraid because from the neighbors. Because the neighbors know that her daughter married a Jew, so she is already...
Under suspicion.
Right. So she herself that he is afraid that is also a reason why she was screaming there. Anyway, we left, and then we also went to a place where my father had bought merchandise. This man had a large room in his a large apartment, a large room where he was sewing and making winter coats and so on. My father had bought by him, and he was not Jewish, and his wife also not, and the children, they were not Jewish. But he was actually also from Poland. So my father always talked with him, and my father had bought a lot of merchandise for him when we had the store in Schlochau. So we went to him. So anyway, he gave us the advice we should go to Erkner, and we should go. Erkner is a suburb from Berlin, and there is a place where somebody rents Boote for people which are on vacation. And you know, at that time, I remember it must have been maybe May. It was very cold now, but it was not so cold. So also we went to Erkner with a train, and we found this boats, these men which had rent boats.
Just for the lake?
Yes, on the lake. He was a very, very nice man. So my father talked to him, and he said, we can, as vacationer, we can stay a few days. He had there a few boats to rent, and also one large room, and that was not a house, that was like
a shack.
A shack.
And the boats stayed on top of each other in the shack.
The shack, and it was so cold, der Joe von Bretter zusammengestellt, you know. Mm-hmm. So for a few days we were there. He gave my mother a Spirituskocher that we could make some warm coffee and so. And at night, it was so cold. My parents, there was one bed where my parents could sleep, and for me, my father put up an old door there, you know, and I slept there. And at night, I put on whatever I had, which wasn't much, on clothes and so. Mm-hmm. And in the morning, when the sun came out, I went in the park by myself and tried to warm up a little bit. So a few days we were there, but it's doch not. They were afraid people will find us and will ask questions, you know. So saw we were not tourists which would rent a boat and go on the lake.
You were actually living there.
Yeah. So then this man gave my father the address. He said, you know what, I know this family, her name was also Hanne, his name was Hannes, and her name was also Dora, I think. Das war a family, and they had the 2-3 small children, and they lived in the basement in a house, and in a small house there. And at that time, Goebbels had called people in the papers, and so there's the bomb, every evening came the bomb, you know, the planes.
From the American and the British bombers
Yes.
were bombing Berlin.
Right.
And Goebbels was the propaganda minister
Right.
for
Whatever
the
he
Nazis.
was. Yes,
Yeah.
right. He had called that people, when they had outside rooms, they should give to Berlin people which want to sleep at night in order to do their war for the war.
To do
their
that-
work for the war.
Right.
So, with
That was
this,
to get out of the city to go to the suburbs where the
To
bombing
sleep.
would, right, to sleep.
yes, and then to come back in the city to do the work. So we went there, and that is what my father said to her. He didn't say we are Jews. He said we have a work, kriegswichtige Arbeit für the war, and him and me, and we cannot sleep in Berlin in our apartment, and if she could rent a room for us. And he gave her a good price. I don't remember how much was said, but I gave her money for it. And he said, she says, well, she would like to do it, but she has only such a small room. She can make it free for us. There was only one bed and noch ein bed, 2 beds. It was a very small room on the side. So, of course, my father said, it's okay, that's good, I will take it. And we never told her really very well. But I think later on she realized who we were. But anyway, we started to sleep there. And then my parents went, I didn't go, they went to Frau Alisch and asked for some clothes what we left there and brought it back. And somebody gave my father the address from they call it in Germany a gardener, but that was like a farmer really. He had in Britz. Britz was also like, he had outside, a lot of land, and he had, they made tomatoes and things for these warm houses, we call it. The houses where it's always on
the greenhouses.
Greenhouses and so my father went to him and said that he would like to work there by him. So they hired, it was a long story. They hired my father. They said he could come and work. And then, work there. And yes, and I started to go from Erkner with the train always to this company, the firma which made the suits and everything. And he said he had only working his daughter. He had an older daughter from a first marriage. His daughter and maybe another woman, and I worked there. I will the lining on coats and so. So for a few weeks, for a few months, it was all right.
What year was this?
My mother always stayed in diesem Zimmer dort. Und she got friendly mit Dora, mit her und mit Hannes, mit her husband. And whenever the alarm came,
for bombs.
Yeah, the bombs.
I mean the sirens for the bombs.
The woman with the kinder went to a special
bunker.
Woman with children.
Shelter.
They said woman with children only. Her husband couldn't go there. He went to etwas anders, it was like a Graben gebaut, you know. So anyway, but my mother didn't go no place, she stayed then in the room or so.
While the bombs were falling, because by this time Berlin was being bombed by the Allies.
In the meantime...
Why didn't your mother go into the shelter?
Because in the shelter sometimes they ask for identification.
And you didn't have it.
But we don't have, yeah. So, und der Schneider, der von der factory where I was, he always said to me, if I see that something, is coming there, somebody which wants to check his, sometimes they came and checked his factory oder so, then I should try, there was a bathroom, and the window from the bathroom was to his apartment. You said then I should ganz quietly go there and try to go to the other door out of. I could go out of the house so that they don't catch me. So, but thank God, actually, I don't remember. Nobody came really.
How long
did you? I was afraid of it, but nobody.
So how long did you stay there?
I stayed a while there. And then I remember one day again, alarm in Berlin.
The sirens.
Yes, and the sky was nice and blue and nothing, in Berlin was nothing, no radio, nothing said anything, that there was something. What happened was, not far from where my mother was, from where the house was, where we were sleeping, there was some kind of important factory which they tried to bomb. But we didn't know it. This was alles so, nicht nur we, the people which lived there so close to it didn't know it either. So that day, it was
the Allies
started to put the bomb
your
down.
neighborhood.
They called it a bombenteppich, one after another, on this whole Erkner there, where we special, where we were, was all
wiped
burning.
Out. Everything
all
was
burning.
wiped out from the bombs.
Yes. So, and we didn't know, we went in the evening, like usually, to the train, and I met my father there at the subway, and not that we talked there much, but we went, and then the train came only to Wilhelmshaven, not to Erkner. So finally I asked, what happened to the Erkner train? You don't know? Erkner is in Schutt und Asche. Erkner is all bombed out. So you have to go to Wilhelmshaven and then walk to Erkner. So that's what we then did. We went to Wilhelmshaven, and there was alles so. The air was terrible. I could hardly breathe. I had a kerchief.
It was a firebombing where everything turned into ashes and smoke. Yeah.
And all overlaying, there was a dog never laying that, and there was a horseling. I don't know, a lot of people even there. My father always said, look right, look left. And we started walking, and finally we came to the street where the houses, little houses there were, and everything burning. I wanted to, when I saw this house was burning, I wanted to run in. I started crying, Mommy, Mommy, wanted to run into the burning house. And then I heard ich bin doch hier. So my mother was sitting there under a tree and waiting for us. So she was, so then she told us that der Hannes wanted to take sie to diesen bunker where he goes.
The shelter.
Shelter. The woman with the Kinder went to the woman's shelter. And this was also from the Nazis. the women's shelter, the Nazis, die main Nazis went to diese Bunkers. Und sie took a few humans, Das heißt, sie do it for women with child. They did it for themselves. Und die men had to go to such a bunker. Sagte, come with me, Rosa, she called my mother. And she told some Hannes, come with me in the bunker. Sagte, you would see nobody ask you anything, come with me in the bunker. So a little bit they started knowing already that something was wrong. So my mother...
They suspected that you might be Jews.
Maybe they did, probably they did. But anyway, my mother said no tattoo him, no, she was washing laundry and hung up the laundry in the backyard, So she said, I put up the laundry here and it will nothing be because it's a blue sky. They'll go, the flyers come only when the clouds are, they hide behind the clouds. Then they come. So was it till now. But now it's they would not come for one another. And then in the moment when he left already, they came and it was, and my mother she says by the next bush, so there was on the side bushes, so she laid down and it was cool on the cool side because she wore a coat. Not a really winter coat, but a coat. She lay down there and she didn't move. She said she couldn't even move. And the bombs were going and going and going. And it was flying and her coat was already like flying. And then it was finished. So she put away tried to make, the funken, from the fire. So,
ashes.
Yes, and there were very few people, which were there around, and so she didn't know what to do, didn't know for us. So she went across the street, so across the woods, and so she sat down there, and she waited for us, So I'm telling you, I remember this.
Was there ever times that Nazis stopped your father?
Yes, there were a few times. It happens a few times. Once we were in the
shelter.
Not in the shelter. They asked, but. And once in a bus, not a bus, dieses train,
Trolley.
Yeah. We were sitting, I don't know for what, again, there I was standing, we never sat together, when we went someplace. Mm-hmm. I was standing extra, my mother extra, my father extra. And my father put in so large sunglasses, which he really didn't need, but at that time, mostly people. So they came in on identification with men. And they went to people and my mother said noch leise zu ihm, spring aus dem Fenster. My father, no, then haben sie mich doch, because they were standing at the door.
Out of the window.
So
Grandpa
he
said
just
no.
Sat there mit den
Sunglasses
und dem Head so und the paper in the hand, before his eyes.
Well, he pretended he couldn't see that good.
Yeah, and they asked all the men, and him they didn't ask. They didn't ask, thank God. Yeah. And
was there another time when he was asked?
We asked later on when he was working in I told you that when he was working in already by the farmer, when we were
By the
the
greenhouse.
farmer already.
Right. What happened?
Alice?
Not in the, he didn't work in the greenhouse. First of all, he knew how to change the windows whenever there was an alarm and the windows from the greenhouse were broken. He could clean new windows in. And he also worked in the land, on the land, you know. And there were these two Frenchmen, the Franzosen. And my father talked a lot with them and was friendly with them, got friendly with them, it was got there friendly with them. And they had given my father a shirt and such a hat. Like
A French hat, like a beret.
Yeah, so a hat. And my father had this on, and you know, when he was working there in the fields. So one day they came to this farm and they said everybody has to come in the backyard. Everybody who lives here and who works here. So we all went. I was with the children and the young Frau, and my mother came also with it, you know. And my father was standing with the two Franzosen.
There were Nazis that came?
Yeah,
Yeah,
inspectors.
the police and Nazis
They kept
came
checking.
and inspected.
They wanted to make sure there weren't any people who were Jews or hiding or deserters
Or
from
the
the army.
deserters.
So they were always checking up on you.
Yeah. So
By now, Berlin was supposed to be Judenreich.
identifications, they said. Identification. So one stand stramm, my father, one stand stramm, you know, like a soldier. Ich sagt auf Deutsch, ich ein Franzos, also hier ist ein Frenchman, and he's allowed to work here, and he took out a show. The next one did the same thing. Then came my father. My father had doch nothing, and he didn't know what to do. He couldn't even, he said in the moment he couldn't even talk. He said, das ist it now. But he said nothing, and he put so slowly his hand as if he takes out some medication, some identification. Right. And they said, ach, das ist auch einer. Und he couldn't wait, he was too slow, you know. Das ist auch einer and goes to the next.
That's an auch einer Frenchman, leave him alone.
Yeah, right. Das ist auch einer mit der, he thinks it's also French.
Were these Frenchmen prisoners of war, or were they
Yeah,
volunteers?
they were soldiers and friends in the French
And they were
army,
captured,
and they were prisoners of war because they needed workers. But the young men were all had to be in the army, so they were allowed, you know, that they could have two workers. And my father hat sich so als Dritter dort gedreht, you know. Yeah.
Upi used to be for the Chevra Kadisha in the old...
Yes, in Schlochau.
In Schlochau.
When was that?
That is true, I didn't say that. He
When?
always said, when something happened like this, he always feels dass die Neshomas haben ihm geholfen.
The neshamas that he took care of when he was watching them before burial came back to watch him during these times.
Really, yeah, that is the way he felt, yes. Because he was very, you know, worked very hard, that's very key. Whenever it was something in the Helle Kedusha, he was one of the first sayers. He said, I heard him saying to my mother, he is the youngest, but they call him first. And, you know, and I heard that he said, they had Tare sein, you know. I don't know really noch till, you know, and so and they needed, you know, the white kittles for the mess and things like this. I heard when he came, you know, when he talked to my mother when he came back, and my father, no matter how late at night it was, Or even in the store, when we were busy in the store, we left the store and we ran on.
So he felt those souls that he helped watch after they passed on came back to help to protect him from the Nazis.
Well, this I don't know. He said he felt dass die Neshomas helped him, dass die Neshomas helped him.
So how long did you stay in this farm?
In this farm we stayed till the end of the war then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You think the farmers ever suspected you were Jewish?
Der Sohn didn't know. The owner war doch the son. And he had to go to the army. And he said to my father, he said, I know the war is, ich weiß, dass der Krieg ist verloren für uns. Das heißt, I know the
war will be lost for us.
For him, for us, he meant for the Germans. You know. So, and I want you should keep an eye and help my, you know,
his parents.
Help my wife and my family.
Wife and family.
When es ist so weit.
So he suspected you were Jewish.
What?
So he suspected you were Jewish.
He did know, yeah. And his mother was a smart woman. She did know too. The father didn't know because the father was also a little bit like he had almost Alzheimer, but he walked around and so, but he didn't really know the father.
Mm-hmm.
And so the young woman, I don't know if she knew it or not, but she was, I was with the children, always with her and tried.
What did you do?
I knew how to sew, and you couldn't buy clothes, I from old clothes, she washed it, and I took it apart and made for the children clothes, whatever I could.
Which town? This greenhouse was in.
Das war Britz, New York. Yeah. You see, my
Britz,
Germany
did
all this.
Britz, Germany, not Britz, New York. Britz, Germany.
Britz, I think it was
Britz,
yeah.
Germany.
It was outside. It was outside. There is the Fluss. What was?
On a little bit, and we're going to continue.
Is Bobby
the next
on now?
Part. Bobby's here.
So, other girls your age were going to parties and going to Sweet 16s and dating boys. You were basically trying to get away from the Nazis and surviving.
And afraid that they would ask me, show your identification or so. And they had people which really had an eye for it sometimes,
Yeah,
if
people,
somebody was Jewish or not.
Yeah, people in Germany, Berlin, every street had their own people who reported to the Gestapo what they saw and what they did. And these were just civilians.
They thought they are interessant when they do something like this.
Right. They just reported.
But over there was more lonely, the farm. Right. There were also, like for instance, when he said to the Frenchman, when he said, oh, das ist auch einer, hat geschrien die Frau Fürstinger, a woman, Fürstner was her name, a woman which was working there in the field. Aber Herr Bernhard, Sie sind doch Deutscher, warum lassen Sie sich gefallen, dass hält Sie für einen Ausländer?
So, but did they hear him?
Wait, could Daddy translate?
But they did, we were lucky, they didn't hear it when she said it, but she said it pretty loud, I tell you. We were really lucky that nobody paid attention to it.
Wow, what Bobby said.
He's going to translate.
What Bobby said was that, do you hear me on there too? What Bobby said was that while the Gestapo agents checked for permits from the, and they said they were Frenchmen, and Opie said he was also Frenchman.
Opie said nothing, he couldn't talk.
Oh, he couldn't say anything, but the Germans said, you were also Frenchman, so Teufel with you.
Also.
There was some worker working in a field who knew all of them, and said, Bernard, why do you let them think you are French? You're really German. Didn't you tell me you were German? Now, if he would have been German, he would have had a proof his paid. Luckily, they didn't hear him. because he wasn't,
But
So,
he sometimes talked to the woman, so she knows that he was German, that he talked good. My father talked the perfect German.
you also talked a perfect German.
What?
You also talked a perfect
Me too, but I went 8 years in a German school.
And your mother also talked a perfect German.
But my mother too, yeah. But
Did you ever slip? Did you ever slip when you spoke Yiddish or something? You never did.
No, I wasn't.
What was the first time you ever spoke Yiddish after the war?
After the war, yeah, really. Yeah.
What was it like when they
Well,
came?
listen, first of all, after, when they came in, it happened a few times that they stopped my father, and he was always lucky. That they almost stopped him,
Well, those
Very
neshamas
hard.
that he was protecting.
And then with food it was very hard, because in Germany everybody got
Ration
stamps,
cards.
certain-
Ration cards.
Yes, and you could only buy so and so much food, and we didn't get nothing. Wir waren nicht angemeldet, so we didn't get nothing. That was already noch when we were in Erkner. So that was a big problem. You know how often my parents went and asked for a bread or so. Or for a few potatoes, and so, and that's, until they paid for it, but the
Salespeople.
yeah. Oh yeah, and their socks. God had when he heard where we go. My father was called them up and told them. So he said my father should call him on a public phone. He shouldn't say no name. He only should say like on Sunday morning in the park. What was the name there at the park?
Who's he talking
About
to?
10 o'clock or 11 o'clock.
The grocery man to give him food.
Yes. He said, and he came with a bicycle. He didn't talk to my father. He left on the bench a package, and he left. In the package was some food, and also they called it Reisemarken. When you were traveling, that didn't get anybody. So on this Reisemarken, you could go in the store and buy, So he helped us with food also.
Wow.
For free?
So now came. You were there. You were there till the war ended.
Yeah, in the farm, yes.
Well, what was it like, the Befreiung? Could you tell us something about the Befreiung?
Over the Befreiung? Well, we didn't know. We were sitting.
When
My
they were
father had
freedom.
some help
After they were free?
build a bunker. They had to build it themselves, and it was near the rail house. And whenever the bombs were coming, right, the bomben, when an alarm was, we went there. They said, believe you me, it was not even. Was no. If the bomb would fall there, we all would be away. But all right, we went there, and then this day I will never forget. It was on my birthday,
April 24th,
April 24. Yes,
19
we were sitting
1945.
1945.
April 24th, 1945.
We were sitting there, and till now was always shooting, loud shooting, back and forth. And all of a sudden, the shooting went with Maschinengewehre, they said, so close. So my father said, this is close. Die Russen sind nicht weit. Bei us came the Russen. other parts came Amerikaner und Franzosen, where as came. My father said, die Russen sind nicht fair. Oi, die Deutschen kreien, wenn sie hören die Russen und wie
You were happy.
say nothing.
Yeah.
And this was right. We went out, we stecked a little bit the hot headers. I went also with my father, and we saw the tanks, the Russian tanks, come in the fields, not on the main streets, on the fields, and next to the tanks mit Maschinengewehr were the soldiers, russische, and that was when we were befried. But it was noch hard in the beginning also, because my father started talking to them. They came, they went to the house by the farmer there, and my father started to talk to them and said them that we are Jewish, and there were Jewish soldiers, and they didn't believe us.
There were Jewish Russian soldiers fighting in the front.
Yeah.
And when they heard that you were Jewish, they didn't believe you.
Russisches oder Polnische. My father could not talk with them because he knew that he knew Russian and he knew Polish also. So when he talked with them, they didn't believe us.
When did they finally believe you?
Well, I couldn't exactly say a date, but I remember it was very hard in the beginning, and that was the Befreiung, yeah.
So you were
So
liberated.
we said we are free. In the meantime, the Germans didn't think that they said, oh, there comes someplace a German army, weiß ich, in Western Germany, and they will free them. So, and you didn't know. We didn't even know what was going on. We thought, we were afraid to tell the Germans who we really were, and the Russians didn't believe us. It was hard, It was difficult. It was upside down, everything. And then the people started walking away. There were a lot of workers, Russian, Russian, Polish, and they had barracks not far there. My father sometimes talked to them, and sometimes came a woman, always an old woman, and used to talk to my father about it and cry. And he saw where are you walking? My father asked. They said, they walk home to Poland. Because Bremen didn't go, they wanted to walk home to Poland. So my father said to my mother, and there's the shooting back and forth.
You heard
over
the shooting.
The border. Mein
Yeah.
Gott, wie heißt doch der Fluss? I'm terrible.
The Fluss? The Oder.
No, the Olga nicht.
Not the Olga, the Oder. The Oder.
No.
Smell?
Frankfurt am, das
Was?
Frankfurt am Main und Frankfurt am Oder. Oh, the river in Berlin?
Yeah. I forgot the name.
I'll tell you later, we'll look it
Yeah.
up.
So anyway, where the Fluss so back and forth shooting. They didn't, we were free, but they, first, I think the 1st of May, so that is when they,
Capitulated.
right, but this was noch 24th of April and weiß ich that. So my father
There was still
said,
another week of
my
shooting.
father thought about it, that you know was, we didn't know, that we haben doch das Haus is sold, but we didn't get all the money in Schlochen. Maybe we will go
Back.
yeah, we will walk with them back to Poland. Alright, that Berlin would never werden, he didn't think that they could, it was so with bombs and
Wiped out.
everything, he never thought it would be built up, So that we will slowly walk with them, we walk away here, here's everything upside down, you don't know what happens, and there they say, they come back, the armies, or that
You didn't know what to believe.
Yeah, we didn't know.
There was no radio, no television, no newspapers, and you heard only lies on the radio.
I just heard this my father and my mother talking. And all right, we started walking with these people back to Poland.
Back east.
Yeah.
How long was this after the Liberation Day? That day with
a few days.
There's a few days?
2 days. So we walked maybe 2 days, one night. It was terrible, And we walked with the regular chaussee. And up there were the woods and the birds. And all of a sudden my father heard from oben somebody, Benjek. Said, who knows me there? With the soldiers, with the Russische uniform.
Somebody recognized Upi.
Yes, einer von them, because what from these Russisch Poland, what was in Berlin there, he recognized him. And he said to him, stay here, come to us, you know us. What did he know from them? So that you know us, stay with us. Because when you come on the end of the wood, there they give you uniform and give you a gun, and we go back and fight the Nazis, and the women and children walk by themselves back to Poland. My mother started crying when she heard this. So my father said, Roschen, don't cry, we will see what we machen. I will find something. So on the next little, where the houses were, it was not a village, well, just a little where a few houses were there. So my father went there to the Bürgermeister and said who he was, and said that he is Jewish and he wanted really to go away, but it's too much for us. He said we cannot walk. He should give us a room oder was for a night or two, and we will go back to Berlin. So, und he gave us there a little bungalow. Das waren Bungalows nur. Actually waren no Häuser, das waren Bungalows, I remember. He gave us there a bungalow, and we were sitting there. And in the morning my father ran to the Russian we took from there a can and for milk, and believe you me, we had one Schüssel. She is here auch, von die Schüsseln waren, die Schüssel, mit der hat man sich das Gesicht gewaschen und ein bisschen gewaschen, and then we cleaned it, and then my father went to the Russische, and he gave us a little soup, water soup, because we had nothing to eat. And then there was a cellar where you can jump in. I don't know, this is really not for here now. I had to jump in every evening in this cellar, and my parents closed it and put the table over it, because the soldiers came in for women.
The Russian soldiers came in for women.
Yeah. Well, my father said, with my mother, and they said,
so
we started talking with
after spending...
Give me a cigarette. And I was sitting there, und there were mice, und ich weiß was noch,
mice,
spiders unten, und I was sitting among the bush.
So
there were so small Saatkartoffeln.
After all that time of living in hiding and living away from the Germans, now you was afraid of the Russian soldiers, so your parents made you go in the cellar at night.
Yeah.
How long did that last?
Oh, that was only 1 or 2 nights.
And then what happened?
We got out and we went back and we started to walk back to the farmer.
Back to the farmer?
Back to the farmer.
Was he happy to see you?
Yeah, the farmer was, I don't know, was the son there? The son was maybe not yet there, but the woman was nice, the mother, the old one. And so, and there was the sister, the sister, she was not married from the farmer, from the young man, right? The sister. And when she said to my father, when she would have known that we are Jews, she would have reported us.
Wow.
So everybody said to my father, you should go and report us. But my father said, the family helped us so much. Because of the family, I'm not saying anything. I don't know if this was right or not.
What happened after that?
Well, then slowly, on the 1st of May was the war over, original, And they did build, the bridges were all up from...
The bombings.
Yeah, the
destroyed.
Weichsel was it not. The Weichsel was in Poland when we went. But sowas, it's only sowas. We walked back then back, my mother and my father and me, and we took a few things we could carry. We walked back to Kastanienallee. We wanted to go back to our old apartment. We left our apartment, furniture and everything. But when we came back, was some walk, I remember. Oh, it was das ein Walk. Alles zerschlagen, a dead soldier, a dead person, a horse which was shot and dead, and people came with knives and this and cut from the horse and meat and took it home to eat. Yeah, what was that? We walked and walked until we came to Kastanienallee. And when my parents rang the bell and the keys they didn't have me and to the apartment, there are other people living there, Germans, and they had our furniture was nothing there, and the woman started crying and said when they got this apartment, it was an empty apartment. I believe because there were no more furniture. And so they said we should stay in the basement, in the
cellar,
where for the Fliegeralarm was,
the shelters.
For the shelter were beds and things. So we stayed there a little bit, and then my mother said, wir haben so viel mitgemacht und die Nazis sind oben. Sie hat mein Vater, so then my father went.
Your mother said, you went through so much, and you should be sleeping in the shelters when the Nazis are in your apartment.
Yeah. So anyway, we got in an apartment. With, there was some furniture. And this was awesome. Yes, and this is how it started then. Then we got our papers. They had our papers. They were looking for us in the newspaper, actually, when
Who's
we
they?
left. That's what they said.
The people who rented the apartment.
No, we got the papers, I said when we left, the Nazis, when they're looking in the newspapers for us.
The government?
But we didn't notice even. We found out later.
They had
throughout the war?
They had your names in the papers that you were wanted?
Throughout the war?
Yeah.
That you were missing?
Throughout the war? Throughout all those years?
I know throughout the war, or just in one or two papers, that's I don't know.
Right. Your name also?
Well, Bernhard Wolstein, I don't know. Bernhard Wolstein's family, or did they have all three names?
So now that the war was over and you went through all this, how did you get your life back together again?
Well, it was hard. For my parents was hard, and money and everything was, not.
How did you get money?
Well, it was hard. It's tried, to work something, do something, and so this was hard then, yeah.
Well, now we're talking about close to 1946.
Yeah.
I noticed in one of the books that were written Upi was elected to the Yiddish Gemeinde.
Yes, because he was very active in the Jüdischen Gemeinde. He always went and there.
What is the Jüdische Gemeinde?
Yeah.
Was meint das?
Yeah.
That's the Jewish,
worked
the representative body of the Jewish community. And there was a Yiddish Gemeinde to Berlin where they elected 6 representatives in 1946, I believe, 46 or 47, I have to check it. And one of those who were elected was Grandpa, Upi.
Yeah.
So what happened then?
Well, what happened then? Then, later, I don't know. Somehow, maybe that we sold something, but we had noch. And my father started, to buy some. It was a business, but it was not much to like Spedition, and together. He came back also there, Friedlein, and but it was very hard. It was
what type of business did he do?
Spedition, they called it.
What's that?
There were cars. There were 2 cars, and we had to go, to the train and brought things from the train and things.
Like truckers?
Yeah.
Truckers?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And Upi did that? Upi drove the truck and everything?
Yeah, yes.
Mm-hmm. So now, what were you doing in the meantime?
But first I was at home, and then I worked also to sew something,
In a seamstress?
Yeah.
So you worked in a seamstress after the war?
Yes, I started, yes.
When you went to school, which grade did you finish?
8th grade.
You went up to 8th grade?
Yeah.
And then around by that time you went back to Berlin?
Yeah.
So you never went to high school in Berlin?
No.
And so then what was life like in, you lived in Alexanderplatz?
No, this was not
You lived in Kastanienallee. You lived in Kastanienallee.
Kastanienallee. It was near Danzigstraße, oder on the other side was the huge section there.
So what did you do?
Huge section.
So now you're doing...
They said us in jeden apartment building is a Schule dort. I forgot the name, because people came back. People came from Russia, from Poland, from the Osten, from these small
towns.
And then
a lot of Jews?
In Schule, that always somebody else, some Russian soldiers, where they were not Russian, it turned out they were Yiddish boys, They came with the army uniform and the Jüdische Gemeinde. They gave some papers. That was not And they stayed in Berlin, and then they went further even to the West Deutschland people.
So
a lot of people came. Everybody was happy. People came. We didn't know them, they came from concentration
camps.
Yeah.
So more and
some
more
came from concentration camps, and some came from Russia, from Poland, which were hiding there and so on.
So now they were living in Kastanienallee.
And there was a camp in West Berlin.
A DP camp.
Yeah, a DP camp. And there were a lot of people in the DP camp.
Do you remember the name of the DP camp? Was it Sachhausen?
It was in West Berlin.
Was it Zehlendorf?
Could be Zehlendorf, I don't know.
So now it's 47, 48. You're working as seamstress.
A little bit, yes.
A little bit.
Not a full day.
your mom is at home,
Yes.
your father's working, and more and more Jewish people are moving back to Berlin. They find
There
themselves
were not that were very few, but they came temporary,
temporary,
so, yeah.
right? And your
Little
father
by little came.
father was now involved with the Yiddish Gemeinde.
Yes, yes.
And which shul did you belong to?
Again, the
Rickestrasse?
Rickestrasse, yeah.
Oh. You have a rabbi there.
Yeah, there was a rabbi.
Do you remember the name?
No. Was a rabbi, yeah.
So
Sometimes we walked over to Oranienburger Straße, but this was all zerhackt. Die Goyim haben einen Pferdestall ausgebaut.
they made a barn out of this synagogue in Oranienstrasse. So now, so what was Berlin like? I mean, Berlin, you lived in the Ost sector.
Right, yeah.
Because Kastanianli was the Ost sector.
Yeah.
The Russians were in charge there. By now the Americans came into the West sector, right, of Berlin.
In the West sector, right.
Did you ever go back and forth to the West sector yourself?
In the beginning, it was not hard, but then all of a sudden it got harder and we allowed not to go in the West sector.
You weren't allowed to go
Yeah,
through
and then after the war, we heard from Uncle Philip and Tante Lina from China,
They were from China, yeah.
and they came back to Berlin
Mm-hmm.
without their son. The son got sick and died in China. Yeah. And my father was busy trying to get an apartment for him, and he got them a job. He took in the West sector. He said to them, not where we are now, you go in the West sector, and he got in the West sector an apartment for them. Because they came back from China, they could stay in the West sector. For us, we couldn't move, so they didn't want us to, it was not hard. For us it was hard. And they got an apartment in the West sector, and my father even got for Uncle Philip a job from joint, by food, by Lebensmittelverteilung. Yes. And my aunt was very good in cooking. She was an excellent. In China, she worked in a bakery there. So she worked also for the joint for cooking. So then little, my parents tried to move to the West.
To the West
It was
sector.
not so easy.
Now, were you German citizens now, or you were still stateless?
Well, there was a law at one time. Then my father became a German passport. My parents became German passport. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then 1947, when my father went to the, I told you, on Pesach for the Seder, he met somebody introduced them to your father, to my husband.
This was
This
1947.
young man, which was alone and didn't know where to go on Pesach. He said he bought a few eggs for himself, but he got a few matzahs from the joint. So anyway, the joint, by the way, gave us also matzahs and something, some food, some Pesach-dicke food, I remember. I mean, I was, my parents did all this, I don't know. So that is how I met your father. And he had a brother there, Karl, Karl, Chaim Yidl. Chaim Yidl became Karl, right? He lived, and they did some business with watches. They brought from the West sector watches, and that was a business, and sometimes cigarettes. And they, and this way they came to a few dollars. And anyway, Karl didn't want, he should go back. He wanted to go back zurück nach Heim, you know. My
Dad.
husband. Yeah, but
He wanted to go back to Bichkov, Czechoslovakia.
right. But because the sister was there, the sister was in Auschwitz, and she came back from Auschwitz, and she met Elia, and what was his last name?
Hartstein.
Hartstein, right. And your father was, he said, he was married already, and you are a young girl, you know, to the sister. But Karl said no, they love each other, and they wanted, he was crazy. He was married and had a child, and the woman and the child remained in Auschwitz. So he was alone. So they got married then, yeah. Karl started to open a store, you know, and you better turn this off now.
Yeah. So now you met Dad, and you met Dad, and you went. Did you start going out with Dad right away, or were you dating?
Yeah, he came again and again, you know.
He showed up.
Yes. And then when he heard that it's my birthday, he came with flowers. Yeah.
And
yes.
so
and he said, you know. And Karl told us later, he said to him, he met such a nice family and the girl, but he thinks the girl is much too young. He thought I'm much younger than I really was.
well, the war thinned you out.
What?
The war thinned you out, made you very thin, right? So now, what did you do? Was there a Jewish group there? Was there the synagogue activity?
Was,
what did you do for fun?
Mizrahi. Was von Mizrahi group, and this was in französischen sector, I think.
In the French sector?
Yes. And I went there. I became a member there, and we went there, and we had meeting, and we had little parties, you know. And like the jüdische Gemeinde made a Chanukah ball, a Chanukah party, you know, with music and dance. My parents, you saw the picture from my parents. They were there, they were dancing, not too much, but a little bit. And yeah, we were there at the Chanukah party, right, yeah. And
did you know about Palestine and Israel and what was going on there? Was it in the papers?
yeah, we once tried, this was not before, we once tried, I remember when we had put out, they said 100 pounds we could use, we had to put it out on the table, and but it didn't work, yeah.
So when did you get serious with Dad?
What?
When did you get serious with Dad?
Serious?
Yeah, when did you know it was serious?
Well, I tell you, we got married in, you know when, 49.
What day?
9/11, September 11.
1949.
1949.
And then what happened then? Where were you married?
What happened then was so, dass your father was nicht angemeldet in Berlin Ost. He was by the brother, yeah. And he was not by police
registered, yeah.
Registered. So my father said, don't try here, try in the
West.
Advice, go to West Berlin. And at that time, Uncle Philip and Tante Lina had already this apartment, so he was als Tenor, in ein möbliertes Zimmer, als Tenor gemeldet dort.
In a furnished apartment, he was a
and
tenant.
lived there, you
Yeah.
know, and lived there and got from the police papers and everything for that he, with this address from Uncle Philip and Tante Lina. And, you know, in Westen.
Uh-huh.
You know, I forgot the name of the street and everything. And so when we got married, I could automatically go there, you know. So we moved. First we was registered there, but my husband took then an apartment, a regular, a very nice apartment in West Berlin. And somehow my parents managed, I don't even know how. After this, they moved also. They were able to get an apartment in West Sector.
In the West
moved
Sector.
to the West Berlin, you know. That was, I think, was American, or I think that was even the British section. And then there was the French section, but those three sections, British, French,
And the Americans.
and Americans, they had one regime. You could go from one to the other, you know.
Right.
Only the Russian you couldn't go. There was the things to know.
So, now that you got married, and where was the wedding?
Oh, the wedding was by Neumann's was the name. Was a Swedish, a Jewish hotel, and they had you know, a restaurant. It was a restaurant.
Kosher
a
food
Jewish
and
kosher restaurant.
And it was called
For the
Newman's?
Americans, no, you know,
This
the
was
name
in-
was Neumann.
West Berlin?
In West Berlin, yeah.
It was Neumann's. And you got
Yeah.
married in Neumann's.
Well, married in the synagogue in Riekestraße.
So you got married in Riekestraße on September
But then
11th.
we went with cars to Neumann for the party.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And, then you moved to your apartment in West Berlin?
Then we moved. The first was a very nice apartment my husband took us.
Mm-hmm.
A very big one. But later I changed because my parents moved to Grolmenstraße.
Mm-hmm.
And das was more, die Synagogue was not far.
The
And it was
Joachimsthal.
near the Kurfürstendamm. And it was a small apartment my parents had, but it was a nice apartment. So we got an apartment, also Grolmenstraße. I think I showed it to you. And it was near Kurfürstendamm.
Mm-hmm.
It was a nice section to go for a walk, with all the fancy stores. And,
Who was the rabbi that married you?
Rabbi, let me see. I have to think about it. Rabbi, what was his name?
You? No. Berger?
I have this all written down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
I have at home the papers, and I have it written down. I forgot the name.
okay. And, then you went to the Joachimsthal synagogue, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember the
I
rabbi there?
don't know.
So now you have, Baruch Hashem, a family. You
This
have.
doesn't belong there anymore.
Well, why not? You have 3 children,
Now I have 3 children. Yeah, then I didn't have.
and now
Then I had one Gary,
one Gary,
one Günther,
Ginte.
one Günther.
Ah,
Yes, and your Jewish name is
Getzelmeyer.
Getzelmeyer. Yeah, one Günther and Getzelmeyer, and you know what's happened when we got talking?
What happened?
Then
Let's keep it between us.
yeah, between us, my husband was in jail by the Russian.
By the Russians? He was in jail.
When I gave birth to him. Because I don't know, he had went to Karl had doch in the store in Russian sector. He went to the Russischen sector in the store and hat gehandelt dort mit Karl dort. They made money there. And the Russians said, das sind, wie haben sie es gerufen, nicht kann man, das sind
Capitalistic.
ja, das sind, ja.
The big crime was being capitalists.
Sie haben Capitalist.
A capitalist.
Und haben sie verhaftet.
And they arrested them.
Yeah.
And where did they take them?
And they took him to Israel. I don't remember.
Both Uncle Carl and Dad?
Yes, but Uncle Carl talked himself out.
Out of jail.
And him, your father, not your father, Stephen. And my father was, Gottes Willen, there I was with the baby. Any day I gave birth to a baby and I had to go to the hospital. And my mother didn't always go to the hospital. She never wanted to go to doctors and so. So Frau Navratsky went with me.
Henny Navratsky, huh?
Yeah, the Navratsky were friends. They lived next to my parents there.
So Dad was in jail when all this happened.
When all this happened.
Well, anything to get out of being in the delivery room.
So my father, when there was in Jewish, wie hieß Meyer.
Julius Meyer.
Julius Meyer, ja. Du weißt es.
Yes, weiß, yeah.
Julius Meyer, and
Julius Meyer was head of the Yiddish Gemeinde at that time.
He was in the jüdischen Gemeinde, but he also was very good with the russische Kommandantura. So he really went for the Kommandantura and alles, and they got your father out. While there was the bris, and my mother, my parents, and they were so happy with the bris and with the little boy, and my mother had made the fish, the fish were swimming in the bathtub, right?
That's where they make gefilte fish. They would swim in a Barry Mab, even in Grand Avenue. You had the fish in the bathtub,
yeah.
And you took them out and gave them a good club, and then we would eat them.
And then we filmed.
And then after of course we cut them first. But then after that, we clean out the bathtub. We took a bath. Remember?
Yeah.
On Grand Avenue. You didn't know
my
that,
mother
did you?
had baked cakes and was busy and everything.
And everybody wanted to know.
And then there was the bris and I took.
And where was the father?
And the father was not home yet. And Julius Meyer said.
Right, he was not my bris.
And Julius Meyer said he will get them out, and then he came home. And there was the Goye, the cleaning girl that we had, the Goye dort left. And we all were in Schule. And when he came, he said, where is everybody? She said, die sind alle in the synagogue mit the new baby. So he understood it was the bris. So he very fast washed himself and made himself a little things and came. He came just to the bris in Schule, just when we started the bris. He said to me that he always thought all the time in the beginning, what will this be? Who knows who's going to raise this? Who wird aufziehen, the little boy and his son?
He didn't think he would get out of jail?
What?
Zadie didn't think he would get out of jail?
Not in the Russian jail.
The Russian jail, I couldn't go there, and I don't know. I know, but Julius Meyer promised, and he got them out.
Your father Upi did not have an easy life.
Yeah.
He did not have an easy life.
No.
He had one challenge after another.
Yeah. From childhood on, right?
From childhood
his parents passed away.
When he was
the younger brother took the grandparents, and he came by to an uncle. I met the family, the uncle. the aunt was already not alive. She got sick. There was some sickness all over, and they couldn't heal us. I don't know. They didn't have the medications, so they said his mother took care of the father, and then when she got also sick. Yeah, and that's.
Now, Upi, who taught him to be about Tefillah? He was always davening for the Yamid. We have pictures of him davening for the Yamid, and he always was the first one in shul, and he went to shul every day. Who taught him?
Uncle Moritz. Yes.
Uncle Moritz.
We said Moritz, Moishe, ich weiß was. I don't know his Jewish name. And they had in this house, apartment house.
At Moritz Wolstein.
Yeah, Moritz Wolstein was his name. That was his father's brother. And they had in the shul, in the walk-in, a stiebel. And he liked to go, he went to the stiebel. And Uncle Moritz went to. They went always to them stiebels from davening.
Was that their stiebel that they made? Or it was just a stiebel for the apartment house?
No, es war ein Stiebel für den Rabbi. A rabbi was there. And I remember when I was a child, there was still a stiebel. I don't know if it was the same rabbi then, but I know there was still the stiebel in the house.
So it was Uncle Moritz?
Uncle Moritz had one son, and this one son always had been my father. He should influence his father, and Uncle Moritz. The stiebel, they don't pay. They don't pay rent.
So Uncle Moritz owned the building.
That's by their Uncle Moritz owned the building.
On the building.
Yes.
So he had the stiebel in the
apartment house. Was not who knows what. Was maybe a 3-family or 4-family house. I remember. And he thought my father should help him. He was against this, the son.
This was in Würzlau.
What?
Würzlau.
That was in Wrocławic.
Wrocławic.
Yeah.
Wrocławic at that time. Actually, by now it becomes Polish when you were there.
It was Polish, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At that time it was Polish.
So Upi
my
learned.
Father had the problem always to go there. He always. When we went to visit, we went first to Danzig. Weil Danzig was different.
International city.
Yes. And from there we used to take a bus to Wrocławic. And the Uncle Moritz always picked my father up. And I think that he took maybe the papers from one of the Wolsteins and gave it to my father, because, they didn't want the He was, in the meantime, my father had the German passport, but that was always better, because he didn't go to the Polish army, So I remember, so we went there. Yeah, that is how we went there. A few times we went. Five always, he said.
Now your grandfather, your mother's father was a Lewinsky.
Yeah, Lewinsky. Was Moshe Lewinsky.
And did he have a shul in his house also?
No, he had a shul dort in Tempelburg, in the city.
In the city,
Yeah. But he was active in the shul too.
So the Torah we have here, that I have, that Torah Upi gave us, right?
Yeah.
Where did Upi get it? Do you know?
I don't know. This is from the shul, yeah.
Which shul?
I don't know. We got from the shul.
From Europe?
Yeah. So I'm telling you.
So now...
now you know exactly my life.
Well, what made you come to America?
Well, when you were born, when you were a little boy, there was young, then all of a sudden my husband said to me, I don't want my son should be raised here in Germany. didn't want it, and he didn't want it. And he tried to get papers. And at that time came a special paper from Truman.
President Truman.
President Truman. People with, we have this a special law.
The displaced person.
A displaced person law. And we came under this law, my husband and me, and of course Gary, it was a baby, yeah.
Gunther.
Yes, and that is how we came.
Did
And
you know
I
that?
didn't want to go away from my parents, really. And I cried, and my mother said to me, you belong to your husband and your child, and you go with your husband.
Like Naomi.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Oh yeah? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what my mother said to me also.
So then you came to-
You cannot stay here. You have to go. You can come to visit when you could, but you cannot stay here. And that's how we got our papers and how we start packing and how we went. That's how we came 2 weeks with the boat, the General Harry Taylor. That I don't remember always. The name of the boat was a military boat, General Harry Taylor. And Gary, the whole boat were in love with him. What a beautiful baby, what a beautiful little boy. And my husband was all right, and he took him and he went with him all day. And I was so sick. I was seasick.
2 weeks.
I almost did the whole 2 weeks. At the end, I got a little bit up. I was laying in the boat, in the cajute that. I was very sick. I don't know. And my husband went with Gary. Oh, he is such a good boy, and everybody wanted to feed him, and everybody liked the best food they wanted to give him. Yeah.
So, how long were you on the boat? 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
How was the
that
weather?
took us. And then when we arrived in New York, there was a
Blizzard.
major blizzard. The people from the boats as well, they had
The
a
dock.
strike.
The dock workers.
Ja, ich weiß, they had a strike. And we had not to stay, I think, one night or so in a cold boat. And then Clara, for my husband's oldest sister, lived here with her husband. And she picked us up from the boat. And she was never freezing there also. It was the coldest day in January, the coldest day of the year.
And we got off the boat.
When we got off the boat.
Now, do we get an apartment? Do we have a limousine?
No,
Do we have a limousine to take us to the apartment?
I don't even know. I think we even went with the train, no?
We took the subway.
Yeah.
So we slept on the D train coming off the boat to America.
Yeah. And we went to Grand Avenue and we stayed by Clara. Yeah.
Who else did you stay by?
What?
You always stayed by Clara? Did you stay
Yeah.
by... Didn't you stay by a Mrs. Smoke?
Oh, by Mrs. Smoke, maybe we stayed there. Das war die End von Isaac.
Right.
Von Clara und Isaac, could be. Did we stay? I think we always stayed by Clara. By Mrs. Smoke we stayed later. Then we went, they wanted on our papers that we should go to St. Louis, Missouri. Because I had there an uncle for my mother, the brother, which was married. But he passed away in between. He passed away. And Uncle Philip and Aunt Lena were at this time already there, So, so there we got an apartment from, it was maybe the joint, got us an apartment.
In St. Louis?
In St. Louis, Missouri.
Do you remember what street?
Yeah, I forgot the street.
Maple?
maybe something like this. The street, that's the moment, this has the same name where the Thelmas live now. I think
Blackstone.
I think Blackstone is it. I don't
Wow.
know. I'm not so sure. I think it was.
Wow.
Yeah, we got in the street, we got an apartment, and my husband, of course, wrote only work. So he got a job by a vegetable man, by a huge vegetable, fruit and vegetable, to go. My husband had an international driving license in the meantime. He got us in Berlin. So he could drive. So he had to drive a truck to the train, bring home the potatoes and fruits and whatever there was for the vegetable store. So right away he said to the man, he is not working on Shabbos. He's not working on Shabbos. Friday night on Shabbos he's not working. So that was a huge vegetable man. He said, oh yes, it's all right. So he started to work a few days, and they showed him where the train is and everything. So he knew already. And it come Friday, all of a sudden, Friday night, for the evening, the boss says, oh, you have not to go once more to the train. He said, look, it is Friday, it is Shabbos already soon, and I have to go home. I don't want to drive and work on Shabbos. I told you. He says, but this is only once, He says, no. He says, well, if you don't want to work on Friday night at Shabbos, then I have to find somebody else. So my husband lost that job. But it was not such a good job. It was heavy to schlep and alles.
What did he do instead?
Well, then he bought the huge paper, and he went, he saw in the papers, in the meantime was hot. In St. Louis was very hot.
And there was no air conditioning.
And no, forget about it, aircon. You were glad when you had the fan. So he got from the papers, they were looking for pressers. Paper were full for presser. He did also the presser. He go and he got a job as a presser to press the ärmel from the coats or from the jacket. Right? He said, he only pressed ärmel am laufenden Band. So. And he pressed, and this was hot, and he was sweating. And at that time came my parents for a visit. They got the papers for a visit. And they stayed by Uncle Philip and Tante Lila, And when my father came, he said to me, Herta, lass ihn nicht mehr dort gehen. He looks terrible, it's not for him. Because he was sweating. And, and then my father didn't let us told me. He said, don't let him go to work there. It was nice in St. Louis, but listen, because he didn't want to take from joint. He wanted a job that we could pay for ourselves, So then my husband said, we will go back to New York. In New York, I have friends from Landsleuth, Landsleuth, and I will do better in New York than here. He didn't like St. Louis. So we went then back to New York. And das ist when we stayed a little bit by Mrs. Smoke, I think, and then by the Tante von Isaac. And then we got ein furnished room in an apartment.
With Dr. Spector. Where Spector's dentist was, right?
Yeah, right, but that's for Mr. Shaw.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he was very glad that we were there. And you always ran when he was a retired man, and sitting in the living room reading the paper. You was run to him and wanted to play with him. You thought this was some kind of a grandfather, So I went in and I said we should come out, but he was very nice. He says, no, I like the little fellow. Don't tell him to come out. He doesn't bother me. He can anytime come in. Because I remember with this he was nice. And then on Friday night on Shabbos we ate together and so. So that was. And then
So my name was Ginter the whole time?
A little bit. Later we changed.
When did you change? How did you change my name?
We changed it. They said it's not good. How can you call it Günther? What kind of name is das for here? And then he became Gary.
Who named me Gary?
What?
Who named me Gary?
Was heißt, we named you Gary?
Who
Annette
suggested?
really bothered.
Annette.
Yeah, Annette.
She suggested Gary?
Yeah, she says Günther is Gary. I don't know.
So that's how you got the name. So, in a message now to anything else you'd like to say or think about right now?
What?
Anything else you want to say?
No.
Nothing?
What shall I say? Little by little my husband was working hard, and then one day, then he always went to the butcher stores, and he really kind of learned because in this section there was one butcher next to the other, and he found Landsleut, and found a job, and but then what happened always, then it was after Pesach, the boss said, you go home, you take unemployment and come back before Rosh Hashanah, before the Yom Tov, the whole summer. And my husband didn't want to take unemployment. For him, he thought unemployment was like fake and, So he said to me, from unemployment werde ich gar nicht haben. So, von unemployment werde ich gar nichts haben. So I have to find out where the customers go. So he started talking to the customers where they go, and that is how he found to go to Belmar, New Jersey. So in the summer he went and then no jobs, and he met in the butcher union another Landsleut and so, and they got friendly, and they had the car, and they went with the car to Belmar, New Jersey, and he worked all summer there. But then he came home and he said he saved up $1,000. That was so much money. So that he had to bring to the bank. So, but I was alone all summer. Yeah. And then we went, and then after a few years, his friend Milton Fife said to my husband in the butcher union, he said, I know a good store. If we could pay a deposit and buy this store, this is an old butcher, he says he has to pay so much, he cannot work. So we don't need, we work ourselves and we don't need workers and we do it ourselves. So anyway, he then bought with this Milton Fife together the first store in partnership. And first they didn't have any workers, and then...
That was a store on Broadway.
What?
On Broadway. On Broadway.
That was that was his first store, was I think 85th Street in the German Jewish section. That was a German Jewish section at that time.
But it was Broadway.
No, Broadway was later.
Which was the first section?
It was 86, I think 86th Street was it.
But it was still Broadway. It was the West Side.
Yeah, the train.
The West Side.
I guess it was the West Side.
So
then that was his first store. And after a few years comes, and they did very good. They did very good there. But they worked hard. both of them. Milton was a good worker too, and Milton was honest. Yeah.
Let's see.
And then what happened? Then came ein Jid always in the store and said, and was sitting there and said, das waren Irish people which owned the store and which owned the business. Was a big business. And they had cars at that time. They gave
parking.
Cars parking.
Garages.
And charged money for it. And they didn't want it no more. And there came ein Jid and he was interested in selling. He had money enough to sell the whole business, the whole building with this car business also. And he started, where is he going for information? To the Jewish butcher. So hat sich da angeschmuggelt to Daddy. Daddy hat ihm geglaubt. Oh yeah, my daddy said, oh, it's a good, it must be a good business when you stay there, when the cars coming and going out, and not have workers which,
right.
So he said, yeah, you must be right. And eventually then he bought this from the Irischen. The Irischen were always very good there. And what was the end of it? Der Jid rented this car business there to another firma. What was the name?
Kinney?
No, it was a real car firma.
Avis?
And they wanted this store where Daddy was because they had an Ausgang in the back, not only the front to the store.
Uh-huh.
So they were only he and Milton didn't know about it, and all of a sudden, come David and said they have to leave.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something, Jonathan.
Jonathan and
Andrew. Just what do you want to say? Any message to anybody?
I didn't think of a message.
You didn't think of a message. Well, Bobby, thank you very much.
Yes, I mean, this is all right. The children and the grandchildren should know, how hard the life was in the Hitler time, and how much we tried everything to keep alive.
Right. Okay. Do you want to do this before we finish?
Yes, that I'm very happy now to have my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren. And I wish my husband would be alive, that he could see how nice and how from the Kinder sind. Thank you.
It's a miracle, yet it's plain for all to see. Since the ancient days, we're still the same one people. We should have blown away with the dusts of history. But take a look, the miracle goes on. It can be explained by a song of the divine, playing in a secret place so deep inside us that connects us all throughout the halls of time. And when we listen closely to its ring, the melody grows strong, the song takes wing. Am Yisrael Chai, that's who we are. There's no other people that has behind the Gulag walls, or a child running from the camps to freedom. Never loses hope, never stumbles, never falls. Then you know he'll reach his destiny, carried on the wings of melody. Am Yisrael Chai, that's who we are. There's no other people that has come so far. Oh, Babylonian armies and Roman legionnaires couldn't crush the power of our faith and prayer. Am Yisrael Chai, singing our song. Someday all humanity will join along. Oh, through the good and the bad times, on this you can rely. We will sing forever, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai. And standing tall, working to create a world of peace for all. Oh, even though we had suffered the worst of genocide, once again we rose to build our land